Hi, my name is Olivia Tate, and I'm a junior at Redwood High School in Marin County, California. Today, I'm going to be teaching you how to play the game of floods. It's an outreach tool designed by the County of Marin to educate people about ways we can adapt to sea level rise. We played the game in my environmental science class, and now I'm going to tell you about some adaptation strategies so you can play the game of floods too. Sea level rise is coming. Climate change is causing glaciers and ice caps to melt, and thermal expansion of warming oceans also causes sea level rise. Despite our best efforts to cut back on carbon emissions, scientists predict that sea levels could rise by 3 to 6 feet by 2100. Our shorelines will become increasingly vulnerable to flooding as sea levels rise. Roads will flood more frequently, cutting off access to communities. Marshes and beaches that are trapped by development could disappear. Homes, hospitals, schools, drinking water, wastewater treatment systems, and important habitat areas will experience increased flooding during storms, and some low-lying areas will become permanently flooded. Billions of dollars of real estate and millions of lives could be affected around the world. It's important that we act now to prepare. Adaptation strategies fall into 3 main categories: protect, accommodate, or retreat. We're going to look at the pros and cons of different approaches, then you'll use the information to play the game of floods. Traditional shoreline protection, also known as coastal armoring, includes levees, seawalls, tidal gates, flood walls, and pump stations. Armoring is our oldest flood protection tool. These structures are meant to keep water out. Concrete seawalls and bulkheads protect the shore from strong wave action and only require a narrow space. However, walls are a short-term solution. All coastal armoring can be engineered only to accommodate a certain storm size or rise in sea level. Seawalls are expensive to maintain over time. Earthen levees protect low-lying land, often from river flooding, and come in many forms. Levees are not a great option on the open coast due to waves, but could be used in creeks and rivers. Like seawalls, levees are expensive to maintain over time and have the potential to fail, with disastrous flood impacts. Flood walls and pump stations are expensive to build and maintain and require electricity to operate. They require a narrower right-of-way than a levee, but are also only viable in sheltered areas like bays and estuaries. Tide gates could be constructed in strategic areas that are somewhat enclosed to begin with. A barrier is fixed in place with a gate that can be opened and closed to control water flow, for example, to prevent the worst flooding during a storm. Tide gates are very expensive and have a negative impact on water quality and fish passage. Nature-based adaptation strategies are an approach that works with ecosystems to protect communities. Some examples are horizontal levees, wetlands, offshore structures such as artificial reefs, dune restoration, and beach maintenance. A horizontal levee is essentially a tidal marsh combined with an earthen levee on the landward side. Tidal marshes reduce wave hazards in sheltered waters, but are not viable on the open coast, except in estuaries and lagoons. They also require a significant amount of space and have not been implemented to our knowledge. Wetlands dissipate wave energy and floodwaters and provide habitat to birds and other wildlife. They protect against temporary flooding, but will not help with sea level rise unless they are backed by a levee. Long-term monitoring for habitat and flood protection is an important part of this strategy. Dune restoration and beach maintenance can provide protection against storm surges and maintain important habitat and recreational areas, but do not protect against permanent sea level rise. Beaches and dunes can still erode over time, requiring ongoing maintenance. Environmental impacts depend on the source of the sand that is used. Offshore structures reduce storm impacts by providing a human-made underwater barrier to dissipate wave energy. An example is oyster reefs, like those being piloted by the San Francisco Bay Living Shorelines Initiative. Monitoring will be key to understanding the success of this strategy. The second category of adaptation strategies includes ways of accommodating development to sea level rise. Existing buildings and infrastructure, including roads, can be elevated. New floodable development can withstand flooding on the first floor and maintain functionality. Elevating buildings is a viable option to protect from temporary flooding. However, we also need to consider flood impacts to roads and utilities that serve buildings. Elevating structures can also block views and change the character of a community. Floodable development refers to buildings and infrastructure that's designed to resist damage from flooding. The first floor is floodable, with no electrical systems or living spaces. Allowing new floodable development at a higher density than what currently exists on Marin's coast could generate revenue to implement other adaptation measures. Elevating roads is an extremely expensive undertaking. Another expensive option is to relocate roadways to maintain access. The third category of responses to sea level rise is managed retreat, which safely removes settlement from shorelines and in some cases relocates critical facilities upland. The managed part of retreat involves establishing thresholds to trigger activities such as demolishing buildings or abandoning efforts to control shoreline erosion. These thresholds can be coupled with buyback programs to compensate property owners for loss, plus strict zoning and building codes that allow only certain types of relocatable or floodable structures. One policy strategy is to restrict or prohibit building in hazardous areas after storms. Building safety standards can be linked to FEMA policies, where elevation or flood proofing is required. On the Game of Floods board, red areas show 10 inches of permanent sea level rise. Orange areas show 10 inches of sea level rise plus flooding from an annual storm. And yellow areas show 10 inches sea level rise plus flooding from a 100-year storm. Now we're going to look at some of the communities on this fictional island. Now, your community and game board may be different from the one that I'm showing you today, but they serve as good examples for any type of community. Downtown Norbay is a commercial hub of the island, protected by undersized levees and vulnerable to flooding. Consider the water supply, gas station, and other critical infrastructure. Shoreline Marina has water-based commercial areas and nearby businesses threatened, and is also in danger of being cut off from road access at high tides. In the game world, costs are simple estimates. We are including them in today's exercise to get a flavor of the trade-offs that governments and communities must grapple with in the adaptation planning process. So, we have our game board here, and as you can see, everything is simple, and we have each category laid out. We have the price, unit, cost, the environmental impact, and flood protection. Some advice for the game: start with one community. What is at risk and what infrastructure is essential? Discuss the economic, environmental, and social pros and cons of adaptation strategies. Consider options that span more than one community. The Game of Floods is played in groups of 4 to 6 people. Each person can choose a town or area on the island to plan for. First, think about what strategies you could apply to protect, accommodate, or retreat from sea level rise. Then discuss with your group and place the strategy stickers on the board. One person should tally the cost of your final adaptation plan using the cost worksheet. Finally, each group should spend a few minutes presenting to the class. Share the total cost of your group's plan and what kind of strategies you used, and any trade-offs you considered. The whole process should take about 1 hour. Visit marinslr.org for more information about the Game of Floods and planning for sea level rise. Happy gaming!